my angels, it's Hailey Reese, and I hope that you guys are having an absolutely fantastic morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is for you, when this video finally reaches you. Today's video is really interesting, you guys. We're going to be diving into the 1927 Santa Claus bank robbery that would wind up taking the lives of 6 people. I know, putting Santa Claus in a sentence with armed robbery and death isn't all holly and jolly, but I figured it would be a really interesting case to cover this month while we are getting into the Christmas spirit. Now, for those of you who are young watching this video, it was absolutely not the real Santa Claus who partook in this armed robbery and would wind up taking lives of individuals. It was an imposter. But I'm really excited to get into this case nonetheless because I've personally never seen anybody else cover this case. And it is just a true example of an armed robbery gone wrong in absolutely every single way that it possibly could. Like, it almost sounds like a spoof when you're listening to it. It sounds like it's a joke of an armed robbery, but because this was very real and lives were taken, it is obviously not. But what I mean by that is that everything that could go wrong did go wrong for this particular robbery. So let's get into this case nonetheless. With that being said, I've really been enjoying Reesemas thus far and want to remind you guys that I'm not only uploading every single day this month on this channel, but I'm also uploading every single day this month on my vlog channel where I'm doing some juicy, fun, crazy, and just really personal content. So if you guys want to check that out, I will have a link down below. And yeah, my last little thing I want to say before we continue on into this case is that I am filming with Grams this coming weekend, you guys. So please comment any video requests down below. And with all of that out of the way, let's get into today's video. So I want to start out by saying that in 1927, it was a very prosperous year for Texas, meaning that the banks were especially prosperous, which brought forth an inevitable crime element to them. Because of this, it was said that robbers were hitting banks 3 to 4 times a day, which led the Texas Bankers Organization to offer a $5,000 reward, which is equivalent to around $70,000 today, to anyone who was able to successfully shoot a bank robber. Now, on December 23rd, 1927, a Santa Claus walked into the First National Bank of Cisco, Texas, followed by several delighted children who had seen him on the street. But then the Santa Claus would pull out a gun and rob the bank. This Santa was actually Marshall Ratliff. Now, Marshall was actually a previously convicted bank robber who had already served time for robbing a bank in the past. But a pardon from the Texas governor would allow him to be released only a year into that particular sentence. But since he'd already been a former resident of Cisco before his arrest and imprisonment, he borrowed a Santa suit and beard so that he wouldn't be recognized. Basically getting into the holiday spirit by masking his identity while committing a crime as none other than Santa Claus, the holliest, jolliest man of the month. Come on, Marshall. For this particular crime, he would actually join forces with 2 ex-cons, Henry Helms and Robert Hill, along with the help from Louis Davis, who was actually a desperate family man and a relative of Henry. He walked into the bank and was greeted cheerfully by the tellers, who actually yelled out, "Hello, Santa!" But their delight would soon drop dramatically when Robert would walk into the bank and point a gun at them and basically scream for them to put their hands up. Like, could you guys even imagine being a bank teller, seeing Santa come in, thinking that he's, you know, a holly jolly individual, and then having them point a firearm towards you and tell you to put your hands up? They then stuffed their Santa sack with over $12,000 currency from back then, but they were seen through a clear window. And a witness had escaped through a side door and yelled that there was a robbery taking place. The police and a number of locals arrived armed and began open firing while the thieves fired back. So it was kind of like a shootout. Now, 2 police and 6 townspeople were shot in this whole shootout ordeal, but at that time, nobody really knew who had shot who, whether it was open firing that had hit innocent people or if it was the actual thieves who had hit them. The four began their escape, grabbing a couple of hostages and fleeing into their vehicle. But that's when they realized that they were almost out of gas and one of their tires had been shot. Now, I almost feel like if you were going to commit such a crime, wouldn't you have already thought through making sure that your escape vehicle was at least full of gas? But I guess that they hadn't, because when they got in the vehicle, they realized that they were almost out of gas and one of their tires had been shot at. They were being pursued by the mob, so they decided to find another car and steal it for their escape. Now, 14-year-old Woody, who was driving, gave them his car willingly, but kept the keys with him. So the group loaded all of their things into this second vehicle, but then realized that they were actually unable to drive away. All of this was happening in the midst of open gunfire, and they were all becoming very injured, and things were getting really crazy. So as they're all getting wounded, they're realizing that they can't start the car and that they have to think quickly on what their next move is going to be. At this point, Lewis was unconscious. They decided to leave him behind and move back to the original car with the two hostages to take off. However, they didn't realize until after they'd already taken off that they had left the money in that car with Lewis. So they left him and the money behind, and now they were just trying to escape to get away with what they'd done. So if we're kind of like walking through this quickly, they went in, he was dressed as Santa, they attempted to rob the bank. That didn't go so well. They got into their getaway vehicle, realized they were almost out of gas and their tire had been shot. They tried to steal a car that they didn't have the keys to, realized that they weren't able to start it, left one of them behind because he was unconscious, and also left the money behind, and now they were driving away with their two hostages in the original getaway car. The mob would find Lewis and therefore find the money, and so their strong pursuit would subside for a little bit, and the money was actually eventually returned to the bank. So several miles away from the town, the robbers would abandon the bullet-ridden car and the hostages and continue on their escape on foot. Now, what would follow was actually said to be one of the biggest manhunts in Texas history. So the two wounded men were doing particularly terrible due to their lack of food, their injuries, the icy conditions, and just the entire ordeal in general. Eventually, the threesome was ambushed by Sheriff Foster of Young County at South Bend as they tried to cross the Brazos River. Robert Hill would plead guilty to armed robbery and take the stand on his own behalf, and in March was sentenced to 99 years in prison. He would escape from prison 3 times but was recaptured each and every time. But after settling down, he was paroled in the mid-1940s and actually became a productive citizen. Now, Henry Helms was identified as the one who had gunned down both lawmen and was sentenced to the death sentence at the end of February. After an unsuccessful insanity plea, he was executed by the electric chair on September 6, 1929. Now, Marshall Ratliff was first convicted of armed robbery on January 27, 1928, and he too was sentenced to 99 years in prison. On March 30th, he too would be sentenced to execution for his role of the deaths of Bedford and Carmichael, although nobody could testify having seen him fire a gun inside of the bank. He appealed his case, and when that failed, he would go for an insanity plea as well. Now, he began acting insane the day that Henry was sentenced to execution, and when he was finally executed, he got even crazier, convincing those around him that he was, in fact, insane. Now, the mob was furious and angry that the phony Santa had escaped the death penalty. They felt like justice should be served for what he did. So they dragged him from his cell in the Eastland County Jail and attempted to hang him, which would firstly be unsuccessful, but when they tried again, they were able to get away with it. Marshall Ratliff was pronounced dead on November 19th, 1929. In the end, the criminals were caught and 6 people were killed, 3 of which whom were the original robbers. And they didn't get away with anything at all. So that is basically the 1927 Santa armed robbery that went horribly wrong. Not only were their lives taken that should have never been, but it was just a really poorly planned robbery in my personal opinion. I feel like in general, any and everything that could have went wrong with this robbery did, and the unfortunate and heartbreaking thing is that lives were lost because of it. But I've never personally heard about this case, so I wanted to share it with you guys and ask your guys' thoughts and opinions on this. Have you guys heard of this before? What are your thoughts on it? And what did you think of today's video? Because that is it for today's video. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my videos, I would absolutely love it if you go ahead and click that subscribe button, and please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness, and until next time, I seriously love you guys so much. Bye guys.